Is 6:09 p.m. on Wednesday, April 10th. And I'm Nicole Shimoni, the chair, with Lisa Dorsey and Bernie Flynn, and we are going to start the Smart Growth Committee meeting. We'll start with item number two, comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. When I fix my mic, we'll keep going. All right. First discussion item on the list, short-term rental ordinance. Nice to meet you, Sally.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome.
I don't.
So we're going to be talking about the short-term rental ordinance, which is an idea that's been around and debated by council a few times, and we didn't have consensus the last time this was brought before council on how to proceed. And I'm going to break it down into three categories of things, and the committee can tell me what you want to do tonight, whether you want to hash it out amongst the three of you, make a recommendation to council on what you want to do next week. But let me try and frame it in as plain language as what you all need to come to agreement on. What districts are you going to allow short-term rentals in? And I've given you each a printout of the borough's zoning map. The current form of the ordinance that was talked about and debated last month includes the NC1, NC2, NC3 mixed use and town center districts. That's a lot of letters. That's a lot of alphabets. It's a lot of the town. So on your map, everywhere that is in the NC1 and 2 districts, it affects all wards, all neighborhoods, all residential neighborhoods in the borough. So that's one very important thing to consider, geography. The second thing that we have to talk about, which I think there is consensus on, is parking. The form of the ordinance right now states that in every district that short-term rentals would be permitted, 1 parking space is required per bedroom in the short-term rental. However, with the exception of the town center district where no off-street parking spaces are required per bedroom. And I haven't heard much debate that is pushing council off of that point. So I think that might be something you can go with as is in the ordinance, because I didn't hear anybody pushing one way or the other on that idea. And the last issue is, by what process are short-term rentals approved? Right now, the form of the draft states that they can be approved by conditional use. And in my 3.5 years here, we've not approved any conditional uses in the borough. And a conditional use process gets approved by council. It's a hearing. The testimony is provided, and reasonable conditions can be attached to the approval by council to the approval of those uses. And each short-term rental that wants to operate in the borough would have to come before council and get conditional use approval. Typically, conditional use approval is the strictest way to get your approval, because it happens in this setting. It happens with 7 elected officials. It happens in a setting where people are comfortable and used to coming and talking about their concerns, rather than a zoning hearing board, which has a little more formal, kind of quasi-judicial feel to it. So typically conditional uses are used for things that have very unique and impactful impacts upon the neighborhood or neighbors. And I've seen conditional uses used for things that are large. You know, you might have a standard in a zoning code that says on lots more than 20 acres, you can do a warehouse by conditional use, for instance. That might be one way you might see conditional uses enacted in a place like Westchester Borough. There's two other options to get uses approved, permitted uses approved. One of them is called special exception. There's nothing special or exceptional about it. You go to the zoning hearing board and you comply with the explicit standards in the code. It should be a checkbox kind of process to say, did you do A, B, C, and D? Applicant provide testimony that you did comply with A, B, and C. And if they did, boom, you get your special exception, and the board can attach any reasonable conditions of approval to those special exceptions. Things like, hey, we heard testimony tonight that your neighbor his property is really close to yours, so you will approve that special exception use, but you have to put up a little bit additional landscaping along this border with your neighbor. And the board would have discretion to add that kind of condition of approval and on a case-by-case basis. And the easiest way and most quickest way for approval is by right. So it's something that's in your zoning code that says, as long as you comply with the standards of the zoning code, you get this, and the zoning officer can approve this use. And there's no other process that you have to go through to get the use. You still have to comply with the zoning code. And if you don't in some way, you go to the zoning hearing board to get relief. But by right is typically what applicants and developers are looking for when they come to a municipality to get approval. Those are the three matters to discuss. I think the geography seems to be the hottest button issue that we can't agree on. My impression over what's happened the last couple months is that we did agree on conditional use, but when we talked a little bit more about what conditional use is, I saw less people interested in going that route because the process involves council meetings to approve each short-term rental. Those are the three issues as I see it. Just so there are more pieces to this zoning amendment. One is that you can't have student rentals be short-term rentals, and you can't have short-term rentals be student homes. And there's a few more standards in there that I'm not going to get into because I think those are the three main issues to kind of help pare it down to what you want to discuss or talk about. So I leave it up to you, Nicole, and the committee to take it from here and tell me how you want to proceed. Do you want to make have a debate tonight and make a recommendation, see if there's consensus amongst the three of you, or make some recommendation to council on this matter?
Well, I mean, I think, we have been floating this idea around for the past year, and we're trying to get to some kind of consensus for sure about what we want to do. Otherwise, we've got these homes out there that we aren't regulating, we aren't really considering as we try to figure out what's the best thing for the borough. What I will tell you is, and a few of my peeps are here right now from Ward 4, I had a very good heart-to-heart conversation with them, what was it, last week, where they brought up quite a few good points to me about, especially the NC1, NC2 areas and what detrimental impacts could happen along the way if we tried to go too fast into them, similar to some of the things that Patrick was saying at our last meeting. So at this point in time, I think at the very least we should have a conversation, because I've kind of had a change of heart with regards to where, I'm not sure I would want to support or recommend a support of where we left it last month. And I'm not sure how my partners in crime here at the table are also thinking, but I did have some good feedback from those, that not just actually from Ward 4, but I've also gotten some interesting emails from other residents across the borough as well.
Can you share that feedback?
Well, one piece, and I know you guys are here too, so if I need support, if I forget something, let me know. But one thing was, if we haven't yet regulated this as well. And one thing, my big thing, and I think you were also thinking too, we have some people that are out there in NC1 and NC2. There haven't been a lot of complaints. It's kind of a shame that we decide to not let them have their small business from what we understand. The problem is we don't have a process to grandfather them in. And if we if we open it up too quickly, there could potentially be a lot of opportunists that purchase available properties, split them up, and create these short-term rentals very quickly. It could explode unintentionally to us because we're like, oh, it's not so bad because there's just a few under the radar. But if we create this allowance, there could be an explosion of this happening. And we're not set up yet to properly regulate it with it. So that was one of the big ones. And then, yeah, along the way, I guess that was the biggest one that I've heard.
I think one,
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah. Little birdie just reminded me. Also, yeah, even though we might say no students, we might say no this, there could still be an opportunity for, maybe not as a student rental, but individuals could come in and kind of stage it out so it could turn into a de facto student rental along the way. That's a potential if we're not regulating it, or, we're not quite sure how it'll all play out. And so it may be better to start a little smaller.
I think I've raised this a couple of times, certainly over the past couple of months since we've been debating this, is we regulate the bed and breakfasts, how many there can be and where they can be. I think that this would, something very similar could be applied here where we would regulate it, right? It wouldn't just be we're opening the floodgates and we can have, 50 in any particular area. And I don't recall off the top of my head what the regulation is for the bed and breakfast, but I know that we limit them in the borough.
You can't have a B&B within 300 feet of another bed and breakfast, and they're permitted in the NC1 and NC2 districts by special exception.
So we could do something similar to that, maybe even more strict, like 300 feet doesn't sound like a lot to me. But, I think we could think about that more.
I don't like bed and breakfast because I don't like the muffins because I have A1C now. No, I'm just joking. The Airbnbs, from the very beginning, I have been a no anywhere other than town center because I believe that they are mini hotels and they're easily more regulated in the town center where the hotels and the businesses are. And we also have off-street parking that they could park in the garages and the flat lots with no requirement for the owner to be present at the building as well. So everyone's trying to accommodate probably the 20 illegal illegal short-term rentals that we have now. And for some reason, I don't know why, our zoning officer never took the time to investigate the short-term rentals and tell them to cease and desist because it's on the books. You're not allowed to have it. But I've come around to think that the town center, if we start slow, we can actually regulate it to a point for the neighbors won't be as affected by the being in the business district. My biggest fear is this is a quaint, cute, livable, walkable town, and I know everybody wants to be here because we're over densified now. We have roughly 40,000 people to live in 2 square miles. We don't need any more people. We got enough. We're getting 3 new hotels, which will bring us 800 new families into the borough in the next couple of years. Mr. Allen and I were the lone wolf on the town center, and I still stay there at town center because let's say my house is 313 West Minor and 315 West Minor. Somebody decides to buy as an investment property, and I have little kids living in my house. My little kids are going to wonder, who are these strangers going in and out next door? When I grew up, look at the color of the hair. That's normally was a drug house. The people going in and out all hours of the day and night. And that wasn't really, good for the neighborhood. I'm worried about the quaint little cute town that we have here, University Town, turning into more than many motels around the neighborhoods. That's my feelings.
Mr. Flynn, being a bed and breakfast owner yourself, are there, and not bed and breakfast, Airbnb owner yourself, are there any complaints in the neighborhoods of the ones that you own?
I have 3. So, and I always made a point to make sure everybody that was listening, know that I have, the family has 3 bed and breakfasts. One,
Airbnbs, not in
Airbnbs,
Westchester.
no. One right next to Four Dogs Hotel, restaurant, which is a scattered area right there. Our people get to talk to the people in the cemetery. One in Longwood Gardens and one down the shore. So down the shore, everybody's used to short-term rentals. And the one in Longwood Gardens, it's on the edge of the historic town of Hamilton, and there's really no neighbors near it. So, now I wouldn't be a hypocrite to buy one and put it in downtown because of my feelings. Ours are scattered. And the main thing, Ms. Dorsey, is and I would like to see it incorporated in the ordinance. The Airbnb people should have to submit a certified letter once a year on how they're rated by Airbnb or their vendor. Because if you're not getting 5s, they're not providing a quality space for people to rent. 3s and 2s, are not good qualifiers for short-term rentals. So, thank you.
I'm getting to the town center kind of line as well at this point in time. And it's not that it can't be done in the future. And this, again, I'm kind of mimicking, I'm pointing at Patrick, who's sitting over there in the corner. I'm kind of now getting on the same page he was last month, that if we do this now in town center, it's not like it's not going to happen ever in those other areas. But we've got a new zoning director. We've got all these things. We can start by setting up all those processes, whether it's a certified letter or other ways of inspection and monitoring these businesses. Start small, and then once we find out it works, and once we find out what doesn't work, because something won't work, right? We'll find a gap. We find gaps all the time in our ordinances and everything. Then we can say, okay, now we might be prepared to take on a next layer. But once we get there, that's again where my recommendation would fall. I like your idea of like the letter. I also support, especially if it's only in town center, I support the strictest version of application, which would be coming to Borough Council, the conditional use, in order to understand best how this works or doesn't work in the beginning, for sure. So,
Ms. Simone, to the point where the certified letter, we don't get all 5s all the time. Somebody can't figure out how to use our Nest thermostat, and they're cold or they're hot or it's just not working. So we get a 4.5 with an understanding and then what we do is we call, we call, and we have somebody on call. If you have an issue at one of our short-term rentals, there's a phone number that somebody will pick the phone up and walk you through whatever issues you have. Or we had our washer machine break last week, so we had to replace it the next day. So it's not as easy as you think, being a hotel owner or a motel owner.
yeah, to do it right. And we could think, I mean, it wouldn't be that we'd want everybody to be only 5-star,
Right,
we'd
yeah.
give them a little bit of reprieve,
We were
however we
4.5.
think about that. But I don't know, other thoughts, comments that we want to share? Do we open it up for discussion with those that are in attendance here? Is that the next step? Yeah. Anyone out in the audience here want to make any comments or thoughts on this? And Carol, come on down.
Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street, and also Vice Chair of CASE, which is Civic Action Southeast. Just preliminarily, I have written this all down so as not to exceed my time. Our ordinance makes clear that the intent is to maintain the neighborhood characteristics in all of the NCs. The name is Neighborhood Conservation. And I have sent you a document that all of you got it in your email, as well as Brian, because I think it has a lot to do with public safety as well, that points those things out and highlights. So I think doing this flies in the face of what our zoning code says. And Ms. Dorsey, just to clarify, B&Bs are not the same as short-term rentals, because B&Bs have a host present all the time, and they're not divided into separate apartments per se. So there is a significant difference. NC2 in the Southeast has particularly and egregiously been burdened with attempts to destroy our working class neighborhood, but we fought back and saved it from further deterioration. As neighbors, we welcome new owners and renters alike, even students who may be there for a year or 5. We get to know their faces, their vehicles, their kids, their pets. We lend and borrow tools. We exchange phone numbers and emails so we can share information. We trade favors. We shovel and dig cars out together. We coordinate plowing. We are aware of habits and are on watch when neighbors are away. We know when something is off. That is what a neighborhood is. Short-term rentals are not part of that picture, and this ordinance could become a repeat of the disastrous trend across the southeast of the borough, especially for 2 decades, ignoring the impact of family homes being sucked up by investors creating student homes and working class families being forced out of our borough. And our comprehensive plan calls for attainable housing. Why would we destroy what we have in the very area where we need it? Trends should not define neighborhoods, especially in defiance of our own code. Cities in the United States and all over the world have recognized that this trend is not healthy for neighborhoods. And you will see that in the documents that I sent you, all with hot links. Hopefully they work. Even all over the world. So I ask, beyond your own opinions or what you think you know, have you done the personal research to inform your legislative decision? Do you know what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided, which is that we don't have to allow these, period, in areas where single family is the intent? Do you know or have you read the discussions and asked for input from impacted departments? For example, building and housing, police department, public works even for trash issues. Do you know the impacts reported by other cities? Do you understand and have you fully discussed the impact, particularly in a town that hosts, and I don't think we're a university town, we host a major university, of over 17,000 young people who would like nothing better than during Rush or March Madness or whatever, to have 4 of their finest friends from Temple, Drexel, wherever, come visit them. And how do we pay for these impacts? The very ones that I've mentioned. I have sent you a short set of sites addressing these issues, as well as a link to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, as well as notes from Civic Action Southeast, where, although it was a small group meeting, our 8 people, and I made that clear at the meeting, were 100% opposed, and one of them is a professional realtor. She said her company does not invest in them and they advise their clients to stay away. We are on alert as a neighborhood group, and I am hoping you have communicated with your constituents to make sure that they are aware as well, because I don't think they're seeing this coming unless you've told them. I would ask you to look at 112-1007, the conditional use. We have granted conditional uses in this town, and they're not usually about humongous things. There are criteria that you have to kind of stick to. Yeah, you can put conditions on, but you have to have a reason for them. So please read that thoroughly, read those criteria. And I will let you know, Mr. Flynn, that Building and Housing was made aware of one of the particular issues and did an investigation and immediately sent a cease and desist letter. So I don't want them to get a completely bad rap. What they didn't do was what the previous Building and Housing person did, which was have someone constantly looking at ads. And now it's really hard because they're online, but they would always look at the local and everything to see if something was being illegally presented for rent. This is a profit-making business. This is not a neighborhood. We are not in it for profit. We're in it to live our lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Ann.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for blurting it out before, but you did say remind you. I'm Mark Matty from 729 South Penn Street, also Southeast. Been there since 97. As Ann said, this is not the definition of neighborhood conservation. To me, that means first and foremost, families owning the property, then family rentals, then everything else. And also, if this were happening in the day when I were in college, this is what I'd be doing. I'd be visiting all my friends at other universities and looking for these properties to rent, to just tear the walls out during, that is what it's going to turn into, especially if there's a good number of them. And I strongly believe that's what it will turn into. And again, for all the other points, it has nothing to do with a family neighborhood.
Joanne Smith, 539 North Church Street. I think Mr. Flynn touched on a comment as well as Ann. We own a traditional bed and breakfast here in the borough. And I think there is an element of the host in a densely intense area that this borough is, of having the presence of a host that is much more important than you realize. Early on in our experience, we had several things happen that were very unnerving. We have learned to deal with that and have learned to be very careful and how to be very careful. However, what happened was we had a guest, and the guest was sitting out on the corners a block away where we couldn't see him. And one of the astute neighbors realized, oh, isn't that unusual? And then she realized he was staying as a guest for us. He was marking down times of people coming and going from their homes in NC1. Immediately, we called the police. They dealt with the whole thing. But had someone not been there to have eyes on the ground, to be a responsible person on site for what was going on in their neighborhood, that would have probably gone a different avenue. And, for those of us, it's a behavioral issue. We already have some young people on this end of town that don't feel that behavior is in the realm of normal of what we would think. But it just is, when I mentioned to a girlfriend that the borough was considering this, the first thing that fell out of her mouth, and she does not live locally, is you're going to become the bachelor party capital. What are you guys thinking? You have a great town. Do you need this? And I thought to myself, she's exactly right. And that just fell out it wasn't pulled out. It wasn't prompted. It just came out. I think it's a behavioral issue. And I think also having the host on site is much more important than you would actually realize.
Actually, that leads, I don't know who I should be asking, but I've stayed at Airbnbs before and it was basically a B&B, right? Like, so,
But without an on-site person.
no, there was
right?
a person, she made us breakfast. It was great. Our dog plays, you know, everybody played together. It was a very nice place. So I guess the question is, are people that have B&Bs not allowed to put like if we talk about this and if someone has a B&B in NC1 or NC2 that's approved as a B&B, are we saying that they wouldn't be allowed to put on Airbnb or, you know, I mean, like, would we allow them, like, maybe it's if they want something in NC1 or NC2, they become a B&B. And then if they want to be an Airbnb, they can do that too or something. You know what I mean? And that it doesn't, but it goes back to then a B&B has this host there. So you're not precluded necessarily from advertising on Airbnb.
I certainly would not want to be an Airbnb. I wouldn't even consider that. You know,
Then you'd have to move.
What?
You'd have to move.
well, you know, the idea that, I mean, people's behavior when they go away from home is not always what you want it to be. And, you know, it's really partially a behavioral issue. And I would not want to have an Airbnb. We would not even consider it. And we are filled as much as we choose to be. So there is no, I think people who are attracted to Airbnbs are different than people who are attracted to traditional B&Bs. I think it's different market. Like, for example, I think people attracted to hotels are different than those who would probably come to a traditional B&B or an Airbnb. I think they're really three different customers. But we are as busy as we would like to be. And so it's certainly not a competition for the same customer in my mind.
Thank you. Any other comment from those who are in attendance here? Okay, how are we feeling about a recommendation here?
I'm going to uphold Mr. Allen's. Mr. Allen never wanted them because he said he could never afford to buy a house in the borough as long as there were short-term rentals. But I still believe that it's a lot easier to start small and begin with town center. And then after that, you know, trial period goes, and I don't know what the trial period is, a few years maybe, then we can look into going into the other neighborhoods through, you know, conditional use or something like that. So.
My position hasn't changed either. I mean, we have them. They have not been a problem. I do believe they need to be regulated. We don't want this turning into an investment destination. I do believe that it is a different clientele. I agree. But we're not attracting, you know, we haven't had any of them that I'm aware, or any of us are aware of for that matter, that have turned into drug houses or places that people don't want to be. We have them now. I don't know that they're having a negative impact on our neighborhoods. I do think they need to be regulated. They've been here for a while. So my position hasn't changed.
Thank you. Brian McGinnis, Ward 3, 122 West Bernard Street. For the record, Mr. Allen did buy a home. So he did buy a home. He did buy a home recently. Also, I agree with Ms. Dorsey that the problem now and to the concern here of the homeowners, current homeowners, and I'm obviously one of them, is that there are currently, I just looked, Airbnb had 24 Airbnbs in Westchester. Verbo had another 10 to 15. So that's almost 40 Airbnbs, short-term rentals right there that are not regulated at all. So the issue here is we have to decide, because if we say just town center, for example, that's limited because you only can have a first floor apartment in town center. That's it, period. You can't do anything else unless you have a carriage home. So that's going to be extremely limited. The issue there is that these other Airbnbs, they're going to keep popping up. And that means our building and housing all the time is going to have to keep looking for them. So my concern is people are going to get around it. And the issue here is, how do we regulate it where we could put teeth in the ordinance, whereas people, if they do not register with the borough, that they're going to have to get fined. I mean, that's where we're going at. When it comes to, there's up here about the housing market. The problem with the housing market is there's no inventory. It has nothing to do with short-term rentals at all. There's no inventory. We haven't been building houses as nearly as we should be since the pandemic. Supply chain issues, labor issues, things of that nature. And of course, interest rates are 7.25% right now. So what we have to do is we have to find a way how we're going to regulate it and put teeth in the ordinance to stop people from potentially abusing it. And that's something that we have never yet discussed, because we don't have the capability to keep looking at Airbnbs every single day and sending out cease and desist letters, because guess what? Another one's going to pop up. So we need to get these people, make sure that they're going to be coming to hearings, coming to meetings, regulating them, and then having fines imposed if they do not meet those standards and regulations. Final point with Airbnb ordinances, I did my research, Ms. Carroll, and the difference between Airbnbs and these short-term rentals and these other long-term rentals is that Airbnbs can be completely discriminatory based upon their scores. So if you're dealing with a long-term rental that's going to be a problem, they have more rights than people that have short-term rentals. And therefore, that could be a situation. We've all experienced that with the college, where it's going to be more difficult to kick these people out and break a lease because they have to go to court and things of that nature. Airbnbs can be completely discriminatory based upon their scores. You know this, Mr. Flynn, as well. So the quality of people, you're going to have a much more higher quality of people than you are with someone that is traditionally renting based upon, credit score or income. That's all I have to say, is that we're going to have to find a way to regulate all of this.
So thank you. What I want to add to that is, as a member of the Westchester Community Campus Committee, we talk ad nauseum all the time. We're trying so hard to figure out ways to better enforce the regulations on student parties and all of the things that happen that interrupt the residents' lives with students. And we've been talking for a year about it, how to enforce our regulations. And it's very hard. It's very hard. There's noise ordinances, but by the time a police officer gets to the house, sometimes the parties have died down because they're kind of on alert that something's happening, so you can't enforce it. So it is an altruistic idea to have these Airbnbs and just let's regulate them. But the problem is, once we write these regulations, they're a lot harder to enforce versus just saying, oops, sorry, you're not allowed to have one. You're done, right? Like, it's real easy to say, it's real black and white to say, you're either allowed to have them and you're not. And if you walk up to a house that's an Airbnb and that shouldn't have it, you can say you're done, versus walking up to an Airbnb that we have allowed and saying, oh, you violated this, that, or the other thing, right? So in my opinion, actually, Brian, it's easier to not do them in the beginning, create those regulations for the town center, and learn how the best way to enforce it there, versus let everywhere have it, create these regulations, and then kind of try to figure out along the way how to regulate all these, 40 Airbnbs that we're just learning about, with these probably gaps in ideas because, you never do it right the first time, regulations. So that would be my response, or my thoughts as you were kind of talking on why it may be better to actually just kind of keep it yes and no in the beginning for certain areas, especially with the fact that we serve our community and we've got community members here. And again, from another ward, I've gotten emails from, where I grew up, next door neighbors and such from that ward. They've also been connecting with me and saying very similar comments to those who are here tonight from the community. So again, it goes back to, if we're talking about kind of where we lean, I'm leaning back to just the town center with conditional use for right now, with the opportunity to potentially move it out into the future.
I have a comment about the discriminatory point. We have parents in our neighborhood who are willing to buy a house and give it to their student. So they would definitely rent these out for their students. Yes.
Yeah, that happens. We've got the student rentals and there's workarounds to be able to get a bunch of students in there. That just what you said. I know I have one right across the alley from me. They bought it for their kid and their kid's friends and, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
I think, we're at
I was just gonna say, do we take this to the full council then next week for discussion again?
we're going back to council work session. Where are you guys on the approval process? There were the three things. Why don't we just kind of take the three things that Sean mentioned so that we have all of those bits that we can kind of take our opinions to. Okay, so.
Yeah, I think we had consensus again on the parking requirement. And I think we had consensus on the conditional use process. So it really does come down to one, which is what we've been debating now for almost a year.
Got it? All right.
Here we go.
We'll get there. All right, next discussion item is the housing proposal for Lot 10 Chestnut and Church Street.
Screen testing. All right, very good. Hello, everyone. That was a fascinating conversation. I've stayed at many Airbnbs, so it was interesting to hear both sides of the conversation.
What's your score?
I own one.
There you go.
In Westchester?
It's a farm. No, that would be amazing. I can't afford a farm in Westchester. Sorry. My name is Ryan Bailey. I'm with Penrose Properties. We are an affordable developer. This is a thrill for me. I graduated Henderson in '97. My dad still lives just outside the borough. And so we're excited to be here to talk about something that we've been tinkering with for a while. I sit on it's a volunteer organization, the Westchester Attainable Council. And we've gotten together and tried to, I believe some people have been in here, maybe Ray Ott, Brian Nagel have come in and talked about different ordinances that could be put in place to create some more of mixed income housing in certain areas. So I've helped them out with some of the nuts and bolts of how it actually works. I'm a senior developer. I've been with Penrose for 18 years, developed property all over Philadelphia, Chester County, Delaware County, and Delaware. So we're going to go through, but I know we are limited on time. So the main points we want to hit is that there's a need for attainable housing in the borough. Absolutely. It can be very high quality housing, well managed, well put together, very energy efficient housing. We're going to show you some options for those types of development that we're looking at on this one site. And we have an opportunity now. So the county is the first place you go for funding for this sort of development. And that application is going to be due by the end of May. You get the application at the end of May. We'll show you this on a slide, but then they make their decisions in August. And then you'd go for a state tax credit application at the end of the year. If you do not get an application in by the end of May to the county, Their next application cycle is going to be 2 years from now. So you really, there's a big break. And then, so this is the opportunity for us to do it now. So what we are coming to you, I'll start right up with the ask, and then we can show you the fancy pictures, is that we're trying to put a agreement together by which our development company can go in and apply for funds to try to put this deal together. It's a conditional agreement. Other boroughs have done it recently in the county, and it basically lets us get our foot in the door to try to secure some of these county funds to then work together for the next year to put together a tax credit application, which would enable us to then go through the whole land development process, whole zoning process with you all. So this is very preliminary and just an opportunity to get our foot in the door to get some of these funds to start this development process. I know right off the bat, parking is going to be the number one concern. Parking is a very hot topic in the borough, as it should be. People love to come. My dad came to First Friday the other night, parked in this very parking lot that we're talking about redeveloping. So I understand what we're here talking about. I understand that there is some capacity that can be moved around within the borough. I'm not saying we're solving all the problem today. We're trying to create a development that also gives back parking at the same time. It wouldn't be a full replacement, but we understand that the borough needs that and the businesses need that. So we're open to the conversation. We've spoke to the mayor, several council members, the borough manager, the solicitor. The solicitor says that should council want to move forward with this type of agreement, one can be put in place. We gave them an outline for what it could look like based on one in Phoenixville. And so he said, go, good luck, give it your best. And if you get the nod from council, come back to us, we can put together the agreement and you can have a application to the county at the end of May. So that's the full outline. Now we'll go through a little of the detail. So I basically I went through today's meeting. There's a problem for attainable housing. What is it? A little bit of affordable, attainable definitions. It's just not everybody is aware of what these items are. What can municipalities do? Introduction to ourselves as Penrose. Local experience. We'll show you a bunch of nice photos of developments that are very high quality around the county and the region. We have WRT here, which is a very good architecture firm out of Philadelphia that did Mary Taylor House in Westchester that we still own and manage. So they'll talk you through a couple of the different options. And then we'll talk about, why the borough would want to do this, the transaction overview, and then of course, next steps. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? The problem is that Chester County is a very successful place to live and everybody wants to live here. So in 2023, the average home sale was $475,000 in the county, which is of course number one in the state, and it's 149th in the country of counties. So very affluent place to be. Borough employees struggle to find housing nearby. I've heard lots of anecdotal evidence of people driving from Lancaster, from Gap to come work here. That is really not sustainable in the long term. Those people are going to eventually leave, and the employers are going to have to train new people to come in there. Nearly half of I was kind of blown away by this stat, but nearly half of the county renters are cost burdened. HUD will tell you that you're cost burdened if more than 30% of your income goes to pay rent. It's the same thing that a mortgage company would look at. They would look at, what percentage of the mortgage payment, the real estate taxes, utilities go. So HUD defines that as 30%. Nearly 50% of renters in this county are cost burdened. So that's a huge issue. And there are a handful of affordable developments being turned over right now. There's one in Phoenixville, that is this one right here. There's one in Calne. The waiting lists are 10 times the number of units that they have. Calne, there's 60 units coming out. They literally have 600 people on their waiting list. It's insane. There's a huge need for it. I bring up the Phoenixville model because the Phoenixville borough
worked with this developer to get them an old site that was an old public works that the borough owned. It's obviously very important from a development perspective of affordable or attainable housing to get a owner that is mission driven, that wants to do this and is patient. We can't just go buy something that's been put up on the MLS because it takes us a while to get the funding together and to work with the municipalities and make sure all the zoning and all the approvals are in place. So that all takes a long period of time. So we need somebody who is interested in the mission, which is affordable or attainable housing, and then someone who's a little patient and doesn't just try to sell the property right away. So that's the problem. Definitions. So affordable housing in our world is low-income housing tax credit housing. So Mary Taylor House right here in town, the Melton Center is new, Picnic Commons. Those are both tax credit deals. Very successful federal program. It funds 50 to 70% of the costs of the development. Then you have to go and get money from the county and a whole laundry list of other acronym groups that you pull all this together. Their rent. So let me take a step back. We're talking about rental here. Everything I'm talking about is rental. We are not offering a home ownership option at this point. It's extremely hard to make the numbers work on affordable or attainable home ownership. There's just not the necessary subsidy that's required that there is available in rental. So we're all talking about rental today. In order to qualify as a low-income housing tax credit, you need to have 40% of your units at 60% of area median income, which is basically like an average. It's based on county by county. Everybody has their own AMI. I'll show you a chart. We'll show you what we're actually talking about. But 60% AMI in the county is $67,000 per year for a household. Then you pull down to 50%, which is more like 54,000. So that is, there's plenty of, there's credits, there's county money, there's all types of subsidy for that. The next item is what everybody's talking about now. It's attainable or workforce. And that's kind of like your middle income. And I have a chart. I can show you exactly who those income earners are. But that's rental units between 60 and 120% of area median income. There's really not gap financing available for this. The county doesn't have it. The state doesn't have it. The housing authority doesn't have it. So what you really need to do in order to create workforce housing from a real dollars and cents and math perspective, if you have to have low-income housing tax credits and or market rate units as well to subsidize it. So it becomes a mixed income community. It's not just all affordable. It's not just all market rate. It's a mixture, which that's what a neighborhood should be. It should be a mixture of incomes and not just like putting all the poor people in one area or the rich people in another one. It should be everyone living together. All right, so that's how we can actually make workforce and attainable work, is to do mixed income. This is a small chart, but you'll see, so on the lower part here, 23% of people in the county, and I should say not people, but households, are considered affordable. That is under 60% area median income. That's the 67,000 right there. Another 25 are considered workforce, which is under 120% of area median income, which is 134,000 a year. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about physical therapists, registered nurses, dental hygienists, elementary school teachers, administrative assistants, postal carriers, firefighters. These are all people with full-time jobs that just happen to make a lower amount of money. Like my dad was retired from the Westchester School District. He was an art teacher up at Pierce. He didn't make a ton of money. We thankfully my mom made more than he did, and we had more income, and we were able to have a house. But that was 40 years ago that house was purchased. That just doesn't happen anymore. So this is a really good slide just to understand exactly who we're talking about here. These are actually the numbers. So I'm not going to bore you with this, but if you had an administrative assistant with 2 kids, making $67,000 a year. You know, that person could afford a 3-bedroom unit, pay $1,700 a month. That would be 30% of their income, and that family would have a place to live, you know, a decent, high-quality place to live. Okay, what can municipalities do? So we've been touring around. We met with West Goshen yesterday. We're going down to meet with Westtown. We have met with municipalities, have met with Kennett Square Borough. So really, we're poking around trying to find groups that think this is important. You know, if this is just not a priority at all, then it's not a priority at all, even though it has all these reasons. But if you can get a municipality to say, yes, this is a priority, this is something we want to do, this is what they can do. So the number one thing you need is land. You know, you need the patient seller, mission-driven seller, all of that. So connect developers to underutilized land, just like they did in Phoenixville. That was an old public works site that they didn't want to use anymore. The borough got it in the hands of a developer, and that building is being built into senior affordable housing. Zoning ordinances. Obviously, you guys spend a lot of time on Smart Growth talking about zoning ordinances and how important it is, and that is very important. In order to get a development like this going, there's going to have to be some sort of ordinance that's put in place. We know that you have an affordable ordinance, but that is not across the borough. You know, that was really done for to make sure Pinckney Commons was in place. But let's use that as an example and move from there. And that's what the Attainable Group has been doing in Westchester, to really try to get a bunch of people's thoughts, land planners, attorneys, you know, myself, other people from the university are getting together and trying to get something that is palatable to the borough. Identify a housing champion. Obviously, it's not just me pushing it. It would be the Attainable Group. It would be people on borough council that thought that this was important. It would be the mayor. This is something that, you know, has to have a number of champions for it to be pushed forward. A wild idea that we have is, well, I'm not even going to go into the attainable affordable tax credit because that's something the county is looking at. It's something that could come way down the line, but something that would be a county-wide, another use of funds. And then, of course, these developments pay municipal development fees. They pay real estate taxes. They pay water connection fees. They pay building permits. But if a conversation can take place, you know, to try to make sure that those are applicable to an affordable or attainable development and not as high as a high-end market rate development would be, that's obviously a conversation that can take place. All right, so Penrose is an affordable and market rate developer out of Philadelphia. We've been around almost 50 years. We are in the top 5 largest affordable developers in the country. I worked there 18 years. We have offices all over the place now, but our headquarters is in Philadelphia. We've done 7 or 8 projects in the county, and probably 30 or 40 projects in Southeast Pennsylvania, and probably another, 50 in New Jersey. So we are a development company and we're a management company. So we've done 27,000 units, 350 developments. Anyway, that's all just to say that we've done a lot of this. We've worked with 80 different partners. Most of the stuff that we do is we come in and there's a partner there who owns the land, or is very mission driven and wants to do this thing. And we come in and show them how to do it and to execute on that and bring in the really good architects and bring in the really good contractors and the engineers and make sure the whole thing is done right. Then after that, we'll own it and manage it. So as you can imagine, we check a lot of boxes when we do affordable or attainable housing to make sure that we're keeping all the regulations and the units affordable at the right level. So that's why we have our own management company to oversee, make sure that's done very well. We also want to make sure that each one of our developments has an on-site manager and maintenance people so that it's taken care of every day. If you walk by Mary Taylor House, it's beautiful and it's maintained beautifully because we have someone there every day looking at it. We have multiple people that are stationed at that spot. We're not, buying something and ignoring it, hundreds of miles away. All right. I touched on the management services. All right. So a couple of photos just to show you that this is high quality stuff. So this is Kinder Park. This was my development down in Delaware County. We did 3 phases of townhouses here, 154 townhouses. This is a community building right here in the middle. This is obviously spread out, but this looks like any market rate townhouse development. I kept getting calls. People wanted to buy the units. I had to keep letting them down because they're not for sale, they're for rent. But I appreciated that. That means that they were well designed. These were designed by WRT, and that they were built well. Next, this is more Kinder Park. So this is up front of the townhouses. And then we built a very large senior building at the bottom, 96 units senior, and it has 23,000 square feet of medical office in it on the first floor. So the seniors can take the elevator down, go see their primary care physician, hang out for the day, do activities, get 2 meals. It's a great scenario. Mary Taylor House, you guys are aware of this one. This is in the borough. This is 60 units of senior affordable housing. And this is very well kept. This is a LEED Gold building. I don't know how many LEED Gold buildings there are in the borough, but this is probably one of the greenest buildings you have in the borough. And it's 10 plus years old. French Creek, this is up in Phoenixville, another senior development that we did. This building's 25 years old and still looks great. Fairview Village, these are townhouses that we did up in Phoenixville as well. And everything I'm showing you here is 100% affordable. And actually, most of these have project-based vouchers in them. So I know that's affordable and project-based voucher are a terrible thing. People don't want to hear about them. But if they're done well, if they're managed well, they can be excellent. Project-based voucher is just an operating subsidy. It's just a way of getting a little bit more income from the federal government to make the deal work and to make sure it operates well. It's not good when someone doesn't pay attention to it anymore and has a market rate development that they're just like letting fall into the earth and just have project-based vouchers so they have free money coming in. That's not what these are. All right, this is Amani Village. This is my project down in Wilmington. This is gigantic. It's 713 units. It's a whole redevelopment of Northeast Wilmington. It is a big community center. It has a senior building in the middle. It has all townhouses. This is mixed income, what I was talking about before. So this is a third of this is market rate, and a third of it is affordable. And then there are workforce units in the middle there, and those are enabled by the fact that we have the market rate units and the affordable units with subsidy. So this is how you get that like kind of missing middle. They're brand new units. They're just charging less rents because it's subsidized by the rest of it. All right, so that brings us to this site. We've been looking around Westchester for years, literally for years, trying to figure out what would work. I've met with the mayor a couple of times. We've talked about different spots around. We basically came across this site as one of the larger redevelopment sites in the borough. And it's underutilized right now. Friday night, it's packed. Right now, there's very few people there. Like during the middle of the day, there's very few people on that site. At those peak times when there is First Friday, there's a lot of people there. And that just makes sense because everybody's coming in. The parking garages are maxed out. Everything's maxed out in town on those key nights. But I've been there several times during the middle of the day and it's parked maybe 25%, maybe less than that. So that's one of the reasons we focused on this. Just there's 57 surface parking spaces, 15 of them are rented by the Cheston House. There's another group that rents the other side. There's no parking on Chestnut in front of it because of all the in and outs. So you're actually losing parking spaces in front of that. But this site does lend itself well to this sort of thing because you need a development that's going to be big enough to actually have that on-site manager and on-site maintenance person, or you just have a rental unit somewhere that no one's looking at. So I'm going to hand it off to David Gamba for a couple of minutes to have him run through a couple of the options. Good evening, everyone. How you guys doing? I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but I'm David Gamba with WRT. I'm a principal at WRT. I also lead our housing and our neighborhood planning efforts. We're a national architecture, landscape architecture and urban design firm. So we are 60 years old now, 61 years this year. We have a lot of experience in affordable housing, mixed income housing, mixed use housing. So what I'm going to go through is a couple different options. Working with Ryan over the last few months after identifying the piece of property, we've gone through at least 24 different options of what we could start to look at on the site. So option one that I'm showing right now is our U-shaped option. So one of the first things we do when we start to look at a site like this is we'll walk around the site, we'll walk around the neighborhood, have some great lunch, by the way. There's some just wonderful places around. And we'll start to look at what are the advantages of the different street faces, what are the types of things that can plug in. So on this plan, what you're actually seeing is a opportunity for a retail establishment on the corner. The rest of the building ends up being rental units. There's a parking garage or parking lot underneath that is actually accessed from Patton Alley, which is along the top there. The way that we've kind of set this up very quickly is the idea is that the main entry for the residents is you'd come off of Chestnut through a planted courtyard, landscaped courtyard into the main entry of the building, which you see the arrow kind of in the back of the U. On this page, you can see also at the bottom some just very quick stats, right? So this building would be 5 stories tall, 5 stories on Chestnut. It's 102 units. And again, this is very early and conceptual. So this is the five-story option. This is the parking garage version of it that you would access from underneath or off of Patton. So I'm sure you are all familiar with this lot. Generally, there's a pretty decent slope from Chestnut down to the alley. So what we would take advantage of is we would enter from the alley side, and that would allow us to basically sneak an extra floor in. So by the time you got to Chestnut, you're actually underground. That's what we're doing with the parking. This option is a 4-story version of that. So this is really what we're trying to study is how many apartment units, what does the density start to look like on the site? That's what we're really trying to hone in here. This version ends up being 77 spaces. Same parking configuration underneath, same entry sequence, same retail, same idea as the first one. We're just simply adding a floor. What we're trying to figure out here is, okay, what does this thing start to look like? We're also looking at it. It's not on the sheet, but we're looking on the right side. You can see some sun studies. So we're starting to look at, well, okay, if the building's this tall, what kind of shadow does this cast? What does this start to feel like for the buildings around it, for the street, different things like that. This was a second option we looked at, which was the L-shaped option. We looked at this 2 different ways. The plan version, you can see, has an open, basically public green space at the corner of Church and Chestnut. The axon drawings in the upper right corner are showing what if we flip that the other way. Obviously, the shadows change a little bit, but we were noticing that the shadows are much more affecting the streets on the when we flip the L the other way, keeping the building on the corner. All of these options are still, you're looking at, this particular one has 52 units, same parking configuration underneath. The option 3 was, again, this one happened to be 5 floors, so it's 93 units. We started to turn the building a little bit to start to look at, well, what happens if we open that courtyard to the west? Does that become private? Does it become public? Similar ideas in the sense that you have retail on the corner, right? You have that main retail anchor on the corner, which I think will be really good there. And you're entering the building right off of Chestnut. This is hot off the presses. We literally did this sketch this morning as we were continuing to think about how to drive the parking count up and keep the building at a height that works the best. So this is either a 4 or a 5-story building. When I say 4 or 5 stories, I mean, I'm saying from Chestnut. So in this particular case, what we're actually thinking about here is leaving most of the parking lot alone.
leaving it exactly the way it is. We take the trees out of the middle, obviously, because we're about to put a building over it. The trees won't live. But taking the last 4 to 5 parking spots along Chestnut and actually turning that to building. So the corner of Chestnut and Church would have an entry or a possible retail component. The rest of Chestnut would have, you know, the entry, some of the back of house rooms, like where we bring power and water and things like that into the building. But for the most part, the parking lot that you would end up here, which is 48 spots, which is, you know, 18 more than what we had on the previous version. This parking lot is pretty much what is already there in configuration. To Ryan's note earlier, the other thing that this does is we start to block off the parking lot entries off of Chestnut, which would need to go anyway per zoning. What it does is it opens up between 5 and 8 parking spots along Chestnut, actually on Chestnut, which are not parking spaces right now because you have driveway entries. This slide has 4 different images. Obviously, one or two of them you've already seen today, but looking at some of the complementary architecture that's going on, being built or has been built recently in Westchester, to start to think about what the height, what the massing, the size of the building could be. So what you're looking at is 5-story versions, 4 and 5-story versions. Mary Taylor House we threw in there because obviously that's one of ours, and we are very, very happy with how wonderful it looks even today. Ryan mentioned we're 10, 12 years old on that project at this point, which is pretty good.
So David, I apologize,
Yeah.
but can we get to the point like of what are you guys, what are you here for tonight asking us to kind of think about or discuss? Let's.
That's exactly what we're kind of sliding back over to with Ryan right now. So all those proposals were more to start giving some ideas of what could actually start to happen on the lot. So Ryan, I'll hand it back to you to talk through the last bit.
Thanks, David. All right, so as we said at the beginning, we are here to talk about an agreement that the borough and our development company could go into between now and the end of May in order to make the county application possible. Obviously a conditional agreement, but here's basically the outline. So if we are able to secure the term sheet with the borough between now and the end of May, then we can submit the county application. They'll let us know in August if the funding is awarded. I think the county would love to fund something right in the middle of Westchester. At that time, we would then come back in and talk to the borough about zoning ordinances and then move towards a tax credit application that could be done probably in the first quarter of next year. So that would be, the first is just the term sheet, and the second is an actual agreement that's more, less conditions, because we've hopefully gotten through zoning at that point, and we have more of an understanding of what the building and the footprint and the parking arrangement is going to be. Then the tax credit award would be May 25, release full architecture and land development, come back in with land development approvals, go through everything with the borough, and try to get land development approvals, secure building permits, transfer the land. We're talking like May of 26 would be the actual like closing on the agreement, transferring the land, starting construction, and then it's a 15, 16-month construction process. And here we are, July of 27, opening the door for the first time. And so the reason we're here today is because of the county application due at the end of next month. And if we were to miss that application, then this whole thing gets pushed back 2 years, and you're talking about 29 for the opening. So this is a breakdown of the land term sheet from Phoenixville. They actually sent me the agreement. I read it. It was a 20-page document. I pulled it down into a 4-page document, send that to Sean and to the mayor and to Lisa for them to look at and just to consider. But this is basically the breakdown. So in Phoenixville, And I'm just saying this is the Phoenixville example. Some of these things are up for negotiation, of course. The borough donated the land to the Chester County Economic Development Corporation, who then transferred the land to the developer. The developer then takes all the risk, finances, constructs, manages affordable, attainable, market rate, mixed-use development at no cost to the borough. There's a deed restriction that's placed on the property, ensuring the affordable units and attainable units are long-term. The low-income housing tax credit restriction is a minimum of 40 years. So we start the conversation at 40 years and go from there. The deed restriction, if lifted by the owner, which is not possible in the first 40 years anyway, if was ever lifted, the developer has to pay the appraised value of the land back to the borough. That's the way they've done this in Phoenixville. The borough, works with the developer on their funding, zoning, and land development approvals. And of course, the transfer in May of 26 is conditioned on getting all the financing together, getting all the land development approvals together, getting the zoning, all those things. Those are all conditions on getting that agreement together. So this exact thing happened on the site up in Phoenixville, and that development is opening its doors, I think now. It's opening now. So this all happened several years ago up in Phoenixville. And then we have a myriad of reasons why the borough would be interested in doing this. The need for affordable housing, essential employees, we went through all this stuff. The number one issue that you guys are probably going to be grappling with is parking, which we mentioned before, which you guys have pointed out. Yeah, okay. Well,
No,
okay.
I'm concerned about parking, so,
Yeah, okay. Well, parking is generally a concern wherever you go.
but I have other concerns.
Yeah. So we looked at our other buildings that are in town. We looked at Picnic Commons, and we were basically, we think we can develop a building that gives the need for the building enough parking and maybe even an opportunity to give some back to the borough and work with, or partner with the borough on making it even larger parking arrangement. The last slide shows the 48 units of parking underneath. We think depending on the size of the building, we may only need half of that. And then the borough could use the other half of it. Or if we wanted to get more creative, we could go down and create another level of parking underneath that and create even more parking there. So these are options that are available. And that's our presentation. Thank you very much. I know that took longer than 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, do you guys want to, this is on for discussion. I don't know if there's any decision that we're supposed to be making tonight. I mean, but yeah, why don't we go down the line on our opinions here?
I'm familiar with this, so I'll let you all.
I'm starting out with a absolute no, just so you know. And I could come off of no, but the number one thing is that's the most expensive real estate sitting in the borough at this particular time. And I don't see any reason why the taxpayers would want to gift a developer that part of the land that is very valuable. The second issue is we built 44 West, the borough, and there's a covenant sitting in 44 West that clearly states that the developer of 44 West, Eli Kahn Corporation, has guaranteed parking spots in Lot 10 because he did not build under the building where he was supposed to go. And through arrangements and covenants, the borough agreed to allow Eli Kahn Corporation to have parking in Lot 10, just like last night we had the Landmark building where Mr. McFadden has 45 spots that are guaranteed in Lot 7, I believe. So that's the number one thing. Full disclosure, please. Penrose was one of my largest accounts when I was selling paint for Sherwin-Williams Company. So it's not that I don't like you. It's thank you. Thank you very much. Sherwin-Williams and MAB Paint were their largest suppliers, and that was my account. I agree that we need some kind of affordable housing in the borough. Milton Center did an excellent job over at the Milton Center for the buildings that they put over there. But Lot 10, like I said, is probably one of the last premier spots of land in the borough and one of the most expensive spots. And I'll never agree to give it away for free because of taxpayer money. Thank you.
So I love the idea of affordable housing in Westchester Borough. Love it. I wish we had more. You know, we're building a lot of apartment buildings. They're probably going to be 500-600 square feet, $2,500. I love the idea of affordable housing. Unfortunately, I too don't love this plan. And I can't see how it could work for our borough and for everyone. For some of the things that Bernie has called out, he's not as concerned. I am concerned about parking. We're building all of these large buildings with what I believe with already approved insufficient parking. I don't think we're going to have enough parking. We're going to add like 300 or 400 people or whatever over the next couple of years without enough parking, and they're going to try to find parking spots. They may look at this lot. Part of the reason this lot isn't full is, as Bernie mentioned, is because the spots are leased. And a big part of last night's parking conversation was for lot 7, but similarly is like, how do we let people know that they can park in these spots? Because right now they don't know they can park in these spots when they do actually have the ability to park in these spots. And that's part of the reason some of these lots are empty. But also, the other thing is too, you talked about potential Chestnut Street spots, but the thing is, if we're talking about closing Gay Street, then Chestnut Street becomes a busier thoroughway at certain times of year. It does already, but even more so if people want to expand upon that. But in the underground parking, from my understanding, is actually extremely expensive. And once you look into it, you may be like, oh, we can't afford this if we're trying to have affordable housing. So I think there's a bit of a flaw in potentially understanding how much that could cost and the impact on trying to support affordable housing. So those are just my initial thoughts. I'm sure as I learned a little bit more, but I just can't see supporting this project in this spot in the borough. Also, like Bernie said, we can't give away land, especially parking land. Yeah, people will come with pitchforks at us, right? Like, what are you doing? So I can't. If you come with another plan that's somewhere else and it makes sense, you know, I'd love to be able to say, let's support you guys, but I just can't see it on this one.
You go first.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, where are other opportunities for affordable housing?
I got one. The Elks Club.
That's privately owned. That's
Well,
not borough property.
No, the borough has nothing to offer. The borough has zero offer as far as affordable housing, a spot large enough to build. But in the borough, the Elks Club is right on the edge of town in Ward 7, Ms. Dorsey's ward. It's a lovely spot right next to Veterans Park. And that would be a nice spot to develop. They use it not very often, and it would be a nice spot to do it. And it access to 322. I would support it there.
And they've been approached and declined.
Well, I can't help them on that, Miss Dorsey.
Right.
But I'm not giving up a gold corner. It's because we actually have Mr. Metrick's office a approved architectural plan to put a 4-deck parking deck on that spot that Mr. Eli Kahn presented to us at 44 West when he built 44 West as an option. And we've never exercised that as well. So.
What?
Can I jump up and address a couple of those? Excellent. All right. If Eli has a long-term ground lease over that property, then I'm not aware of it. So I'm happy to take a look at it. Obviously, if you have signed it into perpetuity with someone else, then okay, it would be great to take a look at that. I mean, I know Eli. He's on the council with us.
Eli's a great guy.
He's a great guy. I text him all the time.
That's what happens with
And I'm not going to step on Eli's toes.
No, institutional knowledge, just like,
Right.
last night, lot 7. So it's
And if there's an
and
agreement,
the reason why he didn't build underneath of 44 West, because he determined that it cost $80,000 a parking spot to build under the ground.
Oh, I'm very aware of the cost of building underground. I was saying it's an option
Yeah,
that
yeah,
if we wanted to partner together,
yeah.
go after county funds, other funds, to make that happen, have a municipal bond, then that's something we could work with you on. I was not suggesting that affordable housing component can afford underground parking. That wouldn't be the case. But we could partner together. We've built several buildings like that. But they were all in partnerships with a parking authority that was then able to float a bond and, pay it back over time. And obviously those bonds and the whole concept had affordable in it. So it was a little bit more saleable than just creating, so.
Mr. Bailey, I have a question for you. Just, Mr. Khan is a part of the Affordable Attainable Committee in Westchester. Was he aware of this plan?
No.
So, okay.
No.
Mr. Metric,
He's got a
do
lot
you-
going on.
Mr. Metric, are you aware of the long-term lease in Lot 10?
That's what we're looking into now that we're putting lot 7 in our rearview mirror next week. That's going to be the next one to look at. It's probably some agreement in the,
Development.
the developer's agreement that we'll have to look at it. My impression that it was temporary, but we'll clarify all those details with everyone.
Okay, thank you.
That said, even if Eli gave that up, I believe the borough needs that parking and that it will fill up very quickly once people realize that they can park there. So,
There's
just-
a number of leases over it. The Cheston House has 15 next door. There's a bunch of parking in there. That is another lease between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. I almost never see anybody in there during that period of time. It's really utilized most in the evenings, for the restaurants and things like that.
Yeah, my point is we just need to understand, and it sounds like it's next on the list as far as parking
Agreed.
lots.
So I'm happy to call them on the way home. No reason for taxpayers to give this property to a developer. I clearly just showed what Phoenixville did. This is another example. They did give the property for free. The argument is there. It's not Main and Main like it is here. So this is a negotiation. We can discuss what would be a real price. I do think that there is a value in creating affordable, attainable housing there. Another, retail location. This is not a big moneymaker for a development perspective. There's a cap on how much fee I can make. I can't really sell this thing. It's low income housing for 40 years. So the real trick for me is to try to make a deal with the landowner that I can go find those funds. I can go to the county, I can go to the state, I can go to the Federal Home Loan Bank, I can go to all those groups and try to pull it together. So any dollar that I'd have to give the borough, I'd have to go find. But that's possible. We do pay for land. So I'm open to the negotiation. I'm open to the conversation. I'm not trying to get it for free. I'm starting off with a zero, example because it makes sense to me to start at 0 and then we can go from there. we talked about the underground parking. Obviously, that's very, very expensive, but we have done it. And we'd go the municipal route to try to get a bond and those types of things. Two, you know, to add more parking back on that spot because it is a valuable parking location. You mentioned all the market rate units that have been approved by the borough. It's impressive. You've approved a lot and very high end over the last like several months. And I'm not aware of any of them that are affordable or income restricted in any level. Right. So what I'm offering is a balance to all those. I'm saying that there are a lot of really good spots in town that have now been approved for very high end market rate luxury apartments. And this is an opportunity to create a balance in the borough. High quality housing in a good location, but it also happens to be for essential workers and have income restrictions. So that's a sell. That is something that the borough should be interested in. That there's a value to that. And the Elks Club, yeah, we contacted them and they were like, we're not interested at all. I do not disagree with you. That is a great piece of property. It's 100% underutilized from what I can see. I'm told the building is not in great shape. You know, an influx of money to buy the front area there, the grass area, to build a building that would even give them community space that we could have in the building and then give them money to fix up their original building. I love the idea. Let's do them both.
And just as an aside, you know, Bernie, how you mentioned your work with Penrose in the past. My great uncle was once the grand poobah of the Elks Club. Fortunately, no pool at this point.
It's the only green spot I could think of.
So I don't know what the next steps are here, Sean. I mean, it's discussion, so.
Yeah, I think that we don't need to revisit all of this, but I think that we should probably be moving this to the work session for further conversation. If this is something that you want council to be able to consider by the May deadline, or we do it in May, it's really up to you.
I mean, we can take it to council to consider. I think right now we're very much on the fence on whether, at least the majority here, on whether or not we would want to support this particular project. Would love to have you come with a project potentially at the Elks Club or where somewhere with a little more space and a little more parking that we could support. I'm totally behind that, but yeah, I'm just this particular location, especially with the increase of residents too, it just makes me nervous.
We appreciate the feedback and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to the rest of the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, sorry.
Terry McClure, 302 West Marshall Street. I too appreciate the need for affordable housing in town. I've lived here for a long time and I'm very happy of the price of my home, but my kids can't afford, one of them couldn't really afford to live here. So I do understand that and I do appreciate that you have that in mind. However, first of all, there's always a cost to the borough. No matter what, there's always a cost. And the first cost would be you wanted us to give you a piece of very high end real estate. We just did a whole bunch of high density housing. I don't know what you think about how many kids might come to this, but what's going to be the possible thing against the school district, because as renters, they won't be paying school taxes. And so I agree with Bernie and Nicole there, and I certainly, wish you all well. But also when you talk about utility of a piece of property is in the eyes of the owner, not just because you think it's underutilized doesn't mean that they necessarily do. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So at this point, we'll move on to our action items. Action item A, motion to consider attendance of solicitor for zoning hearing, considering proposal for daycare center at 1 South Brandywine Street.
This is, staff and legal counsel met with legal counsel for the applicant today, and there still needs to be a little more fact finding. So what I'm going to suggest is that the Smart Growth Committee table this item to May. That was a request of the applicant that we received by email today around, I'm going to say around 3 o'clock today, after speaking to their client. Basically, we need to clarify the issue of whether or not the non-conforming use has been abandoned or not. I think if the applicant can look into the more recent ownership history of that, we might be able to reach a more conclusive statement about whether we would recommend the council to send the solicitor. Now, with regard to that, I did send an email to the members of the committee that there was a timing issue. What we're trying to do at this point in time is move the zoning hearing board zoning hearing that would consider this matter a little bit further back in May, maybe by a week or so. We haven't gotten confirmation from the members of the zoning hearing board or the zoning hearing board solicitor that can be done, because the zoning hearing in May is scheduled for May 13th. And the council business meeting is 2 days after that. So you wouldn't have the opportunity to direct the solicitor to attend the zoning hearing because it would have already happened. So we're going to try and straighten that out by moving the hearing so it's beyond May 15th. So you still have another month to consider whether you want to send the solicitor to either intervene, oppose, or monitor and make sure that reasonable conditions are attached to the approval. And we'll make a more firm recommendation to you once we hear back from applicant's counsel. Or if we don't hear back from applicants, I'm sure we will. I think there was very good faith conversation today about the matter. We will keep this scheduling issue at the forefront because we don't want to fall into a problem where we are forced to approve something because we didn't meet a scheduling deadline.
Mr. Metrick, I have just one question that my mind is stuck on every time we talk about this property. And it says you cannot have more than one principal use on a lot in a district.
Correct. There's two types of uses in any district typically. One's called principal or the main use, and then there's uses that are accessory to that principal use. So a garage is an accessory use to a residential building because if you didn't have the residential building, you wouldn't have the garage. So there's a dependency between those two uses. So there's no dependency of a daycare to a twin housing development. There's no accessoriness, so to speak, between those two. So those are actually two principal uses.
So that's the rub.
Yep.
And the abandonment thing is, it'll be what it is, but that's really the zoning rub. You can't have two businesses on the same lot.
You can't have two principal uses. And in that district, a residential use is permitted and so is a daycare by special exception.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to state and give kind of my opinion here that I sure do hope that we as a community, as a council, don't, look at someone who lives in the community and a potential business way to utilize for the good of the community, a building that has once been utilized for the community and, was a business. I hope that we don't get too caught up in technicalities of where we are today versus what, something that was actually used as a business and a residence probably in the past. And in order to stop somebody who's trying to actually do something, not even that big, just small for the community. This is a daycare that would be beneficial to residents of the community. I mean, they're not selling something that is controversial, if you will, which I won't name anything because I don't want to create controversy, but so my hope is that as we work through this, we can look and find solutions because it seems like we're putting a lot of effort for a small business that utilizes a building that could use some repair, and I'm not sure what else that building could be used for. I mean, we just talked about how we know what this other property could be used for, but this building, otherwise being torn down, like what's would be its purpose? And we've got some people here that want to make a purpose out of it. And so, again, this is my opinion. I don't know the opinion of my partners here up here. I don't want to express that it's all our opinions, but I just want us to be mindful of how we're approaching this so that we don't create obstacles that maybe don't necessarily need to be there for this particular project.
Remind me again how long this building has been empty and what it was before? Do we know?
In the 1960s, it was an electric shop, and then sometime between this 1977 and 2004, it was a print shop. And the matter in question is the previous owner, what was the use or intent to use that building from 2004 to 2022 or 3, I think, when the present owner bought the property. So that's the time period in question, that last 20-year interval that we discussed today with applicant counsel.
I'm stuck on zoning. The zoning board, they are more adapt to answering questions about this nature. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't exist. So, but that's why I want to get the clarification of what that really means. And what it tells me is either the front building can't be rented or the back building can be rented, because you can't have two principal uses on the same lot. So, okay, so one or the other can work. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And I think about how last week we had someone up here, a big corporation of someone who's very, in tune with the community and wants to do the best for the community, but also did not follow our ordinance. And we took a bunch of money and said, okay, go build your big building, right? And this is a very different prospect, but it's also someone who lives in the borough, and it's a building that could be better utilized. And so it's just something that we need to consider how we make decisions that way.
Yeah, there were 5 items that Harb made a recommendation for. They are outlined here. I can go into more detail on any one of them you'd like. 24-08 was a new aluminum store door on an existing door. 50 West Market was 7 new signs on the Santander building. 14 North Church Street was a replacement alteration of doors and windows. Minor Street was a repair replacement of doors on the front facade. And then 120 Eastgate was a replacement of a single sign. So the Harb recommended approval of certificate of appropriateness, which is a condition to do this work in any place that the Harb has jurisdiction. They didn't attach any special conditions of approval except for items 2024 and 2024-14 and 2024-15, where there were some additional requirements that they required the modifications to adhere to, but all 5 were recommended for approval by council. I will make sure that these documents that I'm looking at are also included, because I think the only thing we had posted was the applications themselves. And so when I looked at them and I realized that the HARB's recommendations weren't there, I had to look at them today to make sure I could inform the committee what was going on, but I'll make sure those are on there for next week.
Motion to approve 2024 Gay Street Open Market Rules and Regulations.
These are our Gay Street closure rules and regs. There's no changes from year over year, but we've just, as a matter of course, taken them to council to consider and make sure there wasn't anything you wanted to see different happen this year. The staff has no recommendations of any alterations, but we wanted to continue that process to run it through council.
Any questions from you guys? Nope. All right.
And I think it would be appropriate if you're making a recommendation like on B and C to take public comment on those things.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It would be appropriate to take public comment on the HARB recommendations and the Gay Street rules, since you're making a recommendation there.
Okay. I will open this up to public comment, please, if you guys have anything.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. How much is the bid paying for the posting of no parking for Gay Street? Thank you.
I don't know the answer to that, and Brian is not here, so apologies. Any other public comment? All right, so motion to approve March 2024 Smart Growth Committee meeting minutes.
Just one note for the committee to remember, we will be talking about chickens in May. I didn't have a chance to get that map put together about where the chickens would proliferate.
May is chicken month.
If we didn't eat all the chicken eggs that were laid, the world would be covered with chickens, actually, in about 9 months.
I feel like March could have been chicken month with like the Easter and everything, but all right, but enough. I'll adjourn. Meeting is adjourned
Thank you.
at
7:57.
7:56.